The exact moment my ex-wife lawyer pointed a finger at me and told the court that I was completely destitute was the moment my chest tightened. He argued that I could not provide a roof over my children's heads or even guarantee balanced meals and proper clothing. Every person in that courtroom turned their eyes toward me, searching for signs of guilt or defeat. The judge offered a slight nod, and my stomach plummeted into absolute darkness. I sat frozen, locking my fingers together until my knuckles turned completely white, desperate to maintain my composure. For 2 long years after the separation, I had poured every ounce of my energy into rebuilding a life from scratch. I regularly pulled exhausting double shifts and survived on 4 hours of sleep just to put money away for my 2 kids. But in that clinical room, my relentless sacrifices suddenly meant absolutely nothing. My ex-wife sat peacefully beside her counsel, wearing that familiar mask of sorrowful innocence she always used during our disputes. She wanted the world to believe I was an unstable, reckless father who was unfit to raise his own children. The heavy silence in the courtroom grew so dense that it felt completely suffocating. I desperately searched my mind for a response, but the sheer shock of the accusation had stolen my voice entirely. Before my own attorney could interject, my 11-year-old son stood up from the gallery and walked toward the bench. His small hands shook visibly as he held a sealed white envelope out toward the magistrate. "Dad," he called out softly, "can I please show the judge the secret document I discovered in Mom's home safe?" The entire courtroom froze instantly as the confident grin vanished from my ex-wife's face before the judge even reached for the envelope. "My name is Lucas Vance, and I have always believed that keeping your word is worth far more than winning petty arguments. I spent years working as a head caretaker for a modest apartment complex, earning a humble wage but always bringing home an honest paycheck. My ex-wife Monica used to tell me that my quiet demeanor was exactly why she fell in love with me. Years later, she weaponized that exact same silence to convince everyone around us that I had absolutely nothing of value to say. When our relationship finally crumbled, I walked away with nothing but an old truck, a leased duplex, and a schedule to see my kids every other weekend. Monica kept our spacious family home, the bulk of our joint savings, and the undivided sympathy of our entire social circle. Our mutual friends assumed I must have done something terrible, and I eventually stopped trying to correct them. My kids never judged me by the size of my bank account or the modesty of our living space. They only remembered our traditional Saturday morning breakfasts, pitching tents in the grass when vacations were too expensive, and my unbreakable promise to always answer their calls. Those precious memories were my genuine wealth, yet the legal system continued to frame me as a parent who constantly fell short. My long hours at the job site were twisted into willful abandonment, and my simple home was viewed as evidence of failure. I soon realized that the most destructive falsehoods were not the explosive ones, but the quiet untruths whispered so frequently that people forgot to question them. Every single custody drop-off became another calculated performance designed to make me look small. Monica would stare at my aging vehicle, pausing just long enough for the children to witness her judgment, before asking if the engine was holding up. Her words sounded polite on the surface, but the underlying message was clear to everyone that I could not afford better. School functions followed the exact same script as she greeted administrators with a warm smile before introducing me as the father who is always busy working. The statement seemed harmless enough, yet they planted the narrative that I preferred labor over my own flesh and blood. I frequently caught pitying glances from total strangers who had already decided what kind of man I was based on her whispers. Even ordinary chats were subtle traps meant to undermine my relationship with the children. If the kids expressed joy about our weekends together, Monica would smile thinly and ask if they had received enough food or if the heater was working. The children always answered truthfully, but the leading questions succeeded in planting seeds of doubt within the court record. I forced myself to remain calm because any emotional outburst on my part would only validate the fiction she was writing. My quietness became my only defense, even when it felt like I was completely giving up. Only my young son watched the unfolding drama with a completely different perspective than the adults around him. I noticed him studying his mother's facial expressions instead of listening to her polished words, as though he recognized a hidden truth. I had no idea back then that he was already collecting the vital pieces of information that would shatter every assumption in that room. The final hearing was supposed to be the day I lost my children for good. Monica's legal team presented photographs of my rental property, copies of my financial records, and a restrictive budget that made my life look completely unsustainable. None of the data was technically fabricated, but it failed to paint an accurate picture of our actual lives. Poverty was being deliberately confused with neglect, and personal sacrifice was being treated as a total failure of character. I looked at my kids and realized they were watching how I handled the pressure. That was the turning point where I decided to stop defending myself against people who had already chosen to believe a lie. If the truth was going to prevail, it would have to emerge through cold, undeniable evidence rather than emotional pleas. I noticed my son tightly gripping something hidden inside his winter coat, his eyes completely devoid of fear. Weeks prior, he had mentioned finding a strange document while looking for his passport, but I had ordered him to drop it. I refused to use my own child as a weapon in a bitter legal war, but he had chosen to protect me anyway. As the opposing counsel demanded a permanent termination of my parental rights, my son took a brave step forward. "Your Honor," his voice rang out steady and clear through the room, "I believe this evidence belongs in your hands." The room fell perfectly still, and the silence no longer felt like a weapon being used against my character. The court took a brief recess so the magistrate could review the contents of the mysterious envelope in private. While the gallery murmured with endless speculation, I remained rooted to my chair, refusing to let anger dictate my expressions. My attorney had spent weeks meticulously organizing our documentation, including employment records, school logs, medical receipts, and every text message regarding the children. Together, those mundane pieces of paper formed an ironclad narrative of a dedicated father that could not be ignored. We had also uncovered strange financial withdrawals during the discovery phase that did not match Monica's official court submissions. My lawyer had counseled patience, knowing that documented inconsistencies would carry far more weight than angry accusations. As the judge returned and unfolded the pages my son had provided, I knew my discipline had finally brought me to the truth. The judge read the document twice, his face hardening as the silence in the room grew heavier. He handed the pages to the opposing counsel, whose confidence evaporated instantly as he stared down at the table. Monica looked at the paper, and the color drained from her skin as the judge asked her to explain the written strategy. The letter detailed an explicit plan to falsify my financial status and block my visitation until I ran out of money. Our legal team quickly introduced the financial records that matched the dates and actions outlined in the hidden letter. The judge immediately suspended the proceedings, ordered an investigation into Monica's testimony, and appointed a neutral guardian to protect the kids. Walking out of the building, my son held my hand tightly, needing no celebration because the truth had finally spoken. In the following weeks, the court granted me primary custody after discovering the extent of the deception. My life returned to a quiet rhythm, filled with schoolwork on the kitchen table and the beautiful sound of laughter. I still drive the same truck and work the same job, but I no longer view my modesty as a failure. My son sometimes asks if he did the right thing by speaking up, and I always tell him his bravery mattered most. True justice is not about loud revenge, but about living so honestly that your integrity outlasts every single deception.